Procedures are a named set of SQL statements that are frequently executed together. And when we want to execute those statements next time, we just have to call that procedure by its name and maybe to provide some arguments. Now, both procedures and functions are part of procedural SQL, and they are really similar, but they do differ in purpose and in usage. Purpose of functions is to calculate something and to return some result, while purpose of procedures is to change database objects. So when we want to use some DML statements on a database tables, we should use procedures. Also, functions are mostly used in regular statements, like in select, where, having, and group by. On the other side, procedures are standalone. We call procedures by using separate call statements. Let us now go here to terminal, and I will try to create one procedure, and this procedure will use some data definition statements inside of it. So we will try to create a table and then to add a column to that table. But we will see that this will not work, so we cannot use DDL statements inside of procedures. But if I try a similar statement that is only trying to create a table, I will be successful. But if I now try to read from that table, so if I use select statement from table 1, I will get nothing. So this table was not really created, and we can explain what happened if we use the same statement as this previous one, but this time I will only provide one thing more, and that is the name of a schema. So I will provide this, and this is the only difference compared to this previous statement. So this is the only change, and if I run this, we will get an interesting message which says that we cannot use declare tables with a schema. And this means that create table statement inside of procedural SQL is actually the same as declare table. So we declared a table variable with create table statement. So this is not really a DDL statement. And because of this, we can conclude that we cannot use data definition language statements inside of procedures at all. I will now clean my screen. Let us now see whether we can use data manipulation statements inside of procedures. I will first create one sample table, and then I will read from this sample table just to see how it looks like. So it just has one column, really simple table, and then I will create a new procedure. And this procedure will use insert statement to add a value to this table. So I will first create a procedure, and then I will call this procedure. We call procedures with call statements like this. So this is the name of my procedure. I will just call that name. Our procedure doesn't have any arguments, so I will run it. And now I expect that this statement here is executed, and I can check that if I run select statement against my sample table, and we can see that we successfully called our procedure and that we have inserted a value inside of our procedure. Now I will create another procedure, and this time I will use select statement, but this will not work. We cannot use select statements inside of procedures. Procedures are not made to return some values. For that we have to use functions, so we cannot use select statements inside of procedures. I will now clean my screen. We can use variables in procedures. Here is one example for that. I will first create one variable, and then I will use that variable to update my sample table. So I will run this. After this, our procedure is created, but our procedure is not executed. So if we now read from our sample table, we will see that nothing was changed. Only after we call our procedure, and we call our procedure with call statement like this. If we run this, now our procedure is executed and this change was made. So if we now read from the sample table, we will get a new result because now update was done. We can also use arguments with procedures. So this is an example of a procedure with one argument, and we will use that argument to update our table. So I will run this, and if we now read from our table. Again, we will see no changes because we first have to call our procedure. So I will call it with this argument number 3. So I will run this, and only now if we read from the table, we will see that we successfully inserted that value 3 into our sample table. Now procedures, just like functions, can be overloaded. I will create again one procedure, and this procedure has the same name as this previous procedure, but number of arguments is different. Here we have one argument, and here we have 2 arguments. And these 2 procedures will be actually separate procedures. I will run this, and then I will call this second procedure that has 2 arguments. I will provide arguments 2 and 2. I will run this, and if I now read from my sample table, I will get the result that is actually a sum of these 2 arguments. So 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Now, if we want to delete these overloaded procedures, we have to provide their arguments inside of drop statements. So here I have to specify that I want to delete this first procedure that only has 1 argument. So if I run this, only this first procedure will be deleted. If I want to delete this second procedure, then I have to provide both arguments like this, and then this second procedure will be deleted. Now there is a way to delete all of the overloaded procedures that share the same name at once. For that we can use a statement like this one. This time we would say drop all procedures with this name. So this statement can replace both of these statements. It will delete both procedures. In this case, it won't delete anything because we don't have any more procedures with this name. I will now clean my screen. If we want to wrap our procedure inside of transaction, we cannot use start transaction and commit because we cannot use transaction statements inside of procedures, so this will be an error. Instead of that, we have to use the same approach as with functions, and that means that we have to use atomic keyword. So now our procedure is undividable. So if I run this, our procedure will be just one big transaction. Next, we will see that inside of procedures, we can use control flow statements like case or while or if. I will now show you one example that is using a case. And here we have a procedure that will accept an argument, and based on that argument, our procedure will return either number 6 or number 7. And then we will update our sample table with one of those numbers, and we can notice here that we are using the case statement. I will now run this procedure. So I will call this procedure with the letter A as an argument. That means that we will return number 6. So if we now read from our sample table, we will see that our table was updated with the number 6. I will now clean my screen. I will now again create one procedure that is using an argument. And then we will read about this procedure from the system table. We will run this statement that is reading from system table sys.functions, and from this table we will read about our procedure. We can see here ID of our procedure, its name, its definition. Here is important that procedures are of the type 2. So although we are reading from this functions table, here we will also find data about procedures, and procedures are of the type 2. And we can see that this procedure here is not the system procedure because this is false, and this procedure was created by a user. If we want to find out something about arguments of this procedure, then we have to read from this other system table. Inside of this system table, we will search for our procedure by its ID. We know that the ID is this one. We can see that here. So if I run this, we will now see that our procedure is using one argument of integer data type, just like in its definition. I will now clean my screen. I will now show how we can nest functions and procedures. I will first create one simple function that is only returning number 1. And then I will create this other function, and this other function will use the first function inside of its definition. So this function here will be used here. This first function will return 1, and 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So this other function will return number 3. we can test that with select statement. So I will do select from this second function, and I will get the number 3. We can also nest a procedure inside of a function. Here is another function. Inside of it, I will first call a procedure, and then I will return number 1. Now this procedure here, we have already saw it. I will go to this web page. So this is a procedure that is using case statement, and this procedure will, for argument b, return number 7, and then we will update our sample table with number 7. So I will go back, and first I will create this function. Then I will call this function with select statement, and I will get a number 1, because that is the return value of this function. But this function also have called this procedure, and we saw that this procedure will update our sample table. So I will now read from my sample table, and inside of my sample table I will have number 7, because this procedure will return number 7. And this is how we can nest a procedure inside of function. We can also nest procedures. So I will first create inner procedure, and this inner procedure will update this sample table from number 7 to number 8. And then I will call this inner procedure with my outer procedure. This outer procedure will just call this inner procedure, so it will use call statement inside of it. So I will run this, and then I will call this outer procedure, but this outer procedure will also execute inner procedure. So we will update our sample table, and we can test that with select statement. So if I do select from sample table, I will get number 8. I will now clear my screen. We will now see how to delete procedures. I will paste here one statement, and here I'm using these words if exists. And this kind of statement will never return an error. So if I run this, I will successfully delete this procedure. But we can use the same statement on some non-existing procedure. So I don't have procedure with this name, but this will also return operation successful because of the words if exists. Next, I will try to delete my procedure that has a case statement. So I will just delete the procedure that we have saw earlier that has the case statement, and I will run this, but I will not be able to delete this procedure. And this is because our procedure was used inside of that function. Instead of that, I will just add a cascade keyword at the end. So I will add this, and then we will delete our case procedure, but we will also delete all of the dependence objects. In this case, we will delete function that is using this procedure. So if I run this, this will be successful.